Hey everyone, so it's late July at this point, which means we are so close to an official price release date and pre-order announcement for PlayStation 5, which we are expecting at some point in August, right? So, assuming that's what's going to happen, we're looking at a few weeks, a little less than a month, until we finally get there. And now there's a big discussion about availability, actually securing a system, and of course, which PlayStation 5 people want to buy. So let's go over some of this pre-order news that we recently learned about, but also some pros and cons versus buying a digital edition PS5 or the regular disc-based model. Now, starting off with our availability and pre-order news, if you remember last week on Let's Talk PlayStation, we were going over that Bloomberg report that stated Sony was looking to double PS5 production from 5 to 10 million units, which is encouraging to hear on the surface, right? That implies we might have more PS5 availability compared to what we saw with PS4 in 2013, and certainly going into the first quarter of 2021. This is something where people are really anxious, right? They want to know what the price is so they know what to pay, but they also want to be able to get their pre-orders in and not miss out on a console. Well, another thing we learned on Friday during Jeff Keighley's hands-on with the DualSense is we saw an interview with Sony's head of global marketing, Eric Lempel, where he told us point blank they will not just drop pre-orders on a whim, they will give you notice about this, right? So they don't know where those initial rumors came from. He actually acknowledged those rumors that we were discussing. He said, don't know where they came from, but we will let you know about pre-orders ahead of time. You can prepare for something like this, right? So that's also great to hear. Now, another thing that we are seeing, the folks at Reset Era noticed on PlayStation's official website, some source code that implies if you try to leave your cart or continue your purchase with two PS5s, that won't work. Basically, you can only buy one PlayStation 5 from PlayStation.com. This is just source code. There's no pre-orders up or anything like that, but it implies that when they do go up, you can only check out with one PlayStation 5 console, whether it's the digital edition or the disc-based console. So that's also great to hear. Now, if other retailers will do this, I don't necessarily know. At the very minimum, you hope at least a 2 quantity limit per customer if that's, the worst case scenario, right? Obviously, bots are a lot more prevalent nowadays than what they were in 2013, so understandably, a lot of people are concerned about not being able to get a console. But it seems right now, at least, from what we're hearing, that a lot of this is being thought about and considered in terms of trying to make sure that everybody gets a PS5 if they want one. Now, having said all that, which PlayStation 5 should you buy when pre-orders do go up for these consoles, right? The digital edition or the disc-based machine? Let's go over the pros and cons here, which admittedly we can say that there's mostly cons working against the digital edition PS5, so that will be the bulk of this, although I guarantee you we're going to make a lot of points here that many people are not discussing or completely overlooking or really just not considering when discussing, which console you should realistically buy. And we should also go into this with the assumption that the digital console will be cheaper. As of right now, we don't have price announcements, so we don't know how much, but I think most people can agree it will be slightly cheaper than the disc-based model. I know a lot of people are hoping for a $100 price difference. That seems very unlikely. It's probably going to be about $50. Sony's not going to save that much money by removing the disk drive, even accounting for the fact that software has a larger revenue split for Sony and the publishers when you're cutting out retailers. It's still, if it's a $100 difference, Sony's going to have to sell a lot of software per digital PS5, so that doesn't seem very likely. Just as a slight warning here, you should probably expect a $50 price difference. But anyway, let's really get into this, which is the price difference itself, right? This is initially seen as a pro that you're saving money, and that certainly is a pro. We'll talk about that in a second, but this is more of a con to me when you consider the long-term ownership cost of a PlayStation 5, right? If you're somebody that's going to buy this thing, own it over a long period of time, years, let's say, and you're going to buy a lot of software, then you are not going to come out ahead in terms of trying to save money from what was a cheaper initial purchase on day one, right? It's important to note when we talk about something like price, it's all relative. It's all about what you can comfortably afford, and this is a very expensive hobby at the end of the day, and because of that, many people will try and go for an affordable purchase on day one, which would be a digital PS5. But whether it's $50, $100, or even $150 cheaper, you are really setting yourself up for failure in terms of lifetime ownership cost. There's no way you're going to be able to beat the potential savings of having the option to buy discs, right? That's the biggest con here when we talk about the digital PS5. Your only source of buying games is the PlayStation Store. So it's not even so much the principle that you can't buy discs, it's that you can't buy discs from anywhere. Multiple retailers running all these different sales, price matching each other, independent sellers, eBay, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, garage sales, borrowing games from a friend. It's just unmatched in terms of your options of being able to buy games and the availability of those sales for those games, right? It's not to say that the PlayStation Store doesn't run sales and doesn't run good sales. There's been a lot of great sales weekly on the PlayStation Store, but you're at the heels of what the PlayStation Store does and when you want to buy a game. If you want to buy something, on the PlayStation Store, you better hope it's a good price. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be inclined to buy that game. In fact, one of the worst things about buying from the PlayStation Store is that games often stay at $60 well beyond they've already devalued from retail or just people trading around the game, right? That gets very annoying, and that's something that retailers actually have to worry about, and that's the benefit here is that they have shelf space, right? Even online where there's warehouse space, those games need to get liquidated, they need to get moved, and so you will see very favorable sales for those games, whereas on the PlayStation Store, $59.99, and it takes a very long time for the publisher to send out a sale for that game. Now, let me just paint a few different situations for you. Let's say you've already gone all digital on PS4, which many people are doing today. What I often see is that 95% of their library is in fact digital, but then 5 or maybe even 10% is still physical, and they'll usually admit that those games are from impulse buys or deals that were just too good to be true, deals they couldn't pass up, and those are opportunities that you're also throwing away. Seeing Wario64 tweet out a link to a sale you've been waiting for a very long time, or walking past GameStop, God forbid if it's still open, and they've got a buy 2, get 1 free, or, they've been very aggressive with that. They let you stack those, right? You can buy 10 games, you're walking away with 5 of them being free. I mean, these are things that you're just not going to be able to partake in anymore. So even if you're going all digital, there are still just situations where the games, the deals you see are too good to walk away from. Another thing I often see masquerading as a pro is that my entire library lives on my console. I don't have to get up and change discs anymore, and that's certainly true until you buy more and more games. So it really depends on how you handle your games for certain people, right? Some people play a game, finish it, delete it, they never touch it ever again. But if you like going back to older games, if you have a larger library, this becomes an issue when you've gone all digital with that very precious SSD space. Even if you've expanded your storage, which you can certainly do on PS5 and PS4, these games are upwards of 25, 60 to 100 gigabytes, including patches. So assuming that we're talking about full, retail style games, big AAA games, mind you, you're only going to be able to hold like anywhere from 5 to 20 games on the high end, right? So once you start growing a collection, it's not as interchangeable as you would initially think. Now, discs still have install times, and they still have patches just like anything else, but more often than not, it's quicker to start a disc than to download all those games over again if you do want to, say, go back to an older title that you've already previously deleted, right? So if you have faster internet, that might work out for you, but still, downloading, let's say, 80-something gigabytes to play a game is, you're going to be waiting for something like that. So it's not as interchangeable as you're made to believe. And then, of course, there's also the simple fact that what if you've lost your internet? Then you totally lose the ability to actually re-download any of these games. Smaller circumstance, and it's one that I don't think really happens that often for people, but it's just something to also think about. But really, let's get into some bigger cons here, which is something that probably other people would have told you at the start of the video, but the obvious one, you can't sell your games, right? Once they're digital, you have them, and you're kind of stuck with them, right? For a lot of people, it's very important to sell your games to buy more games. For younger children, I mean, most of us probably did that, right? You sold your games, or you let friends borrow your games. You, of course, can't do that with digital, so you're really losing out on that ability as well. Also, if you're buying digital, you have to be stuck with Sony's ridiculous return policy, where if you even so much as start the game, then you can't return it. So that's also a big issue as well if you care about returns. But also the other one here is that the game is never truly yours, right? You just own a license. At some point the game could get pulled from the PlayStation Store, or it could vanish from your download list, and you never truly own that particular game. You got to make sure it's downloaded. That's something that's a big sticking point for a lot of people. I think someone else probably would have made this a huge deal. Quite honestly, and this is coming from somebody that buys physical games, I don't think this is as huge of a con as people make it out to be, just based off the context that we have with PS4 and PS5. And most digital purchases, which is, yes, there are examples for Sony and outside of Sony on trying to get back digital purchases or get refunds or trying to re-download something. I know that it's totally out there and it happens, but it's not as frequent as it's made out to be. 99% of the PlayStation Store is completely intact in terms of content that's available, right? Things I've purchased from 2006 are still there if I want to re-download them on PS3 or PSP or whatever. It's just a numbers thing. You have to look at what we have so far, and for PlayStation Network, the availability is well over 99%. And even if things do get pulled, you can actually still re-download them. So just having to deal with whatever issues that Sony might have on their end can certainly be a pain, but for the most part, this wouldn't even bother me if I had to go all digital. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's go over some genuine pros for a digital PS5, which is that, yes, it will be cheaper. Despite our initial conversation, at the very minimum, you will walk away with your purchase spending less than if it were a disc-based PlayStation 5. That, and something the disc-based PS5 doesn't have, is a symmetric console design. So something very subjective, depends on your flavor and taste, but a lot of people really like the slimmer, symmetric profile of the digital PlayStation 5, so if that's something that it means a lot to you, then you probably want to go ahead and buy that console for how it looks. But outside of that, that's it. Those are the only truly unique pros we can make for the digital PS5. Anything onward also applies to the disc-based machine because it still accepts digital downloads. So I know it appears very one-sided, but you're only sacrificing by buying a digital-based machine. But let's still try to make a case for this, right? And so what I'm about to say is a huge stretch and highly speculative, but let's say you buy a digital PS5. In theory, long-term, you're securing your library into the future, where at some point, if we abandon physical media, which is bound to happen eventually, you're pretty much securing compatibility moving forward, whereas somebody that has been buying discs will be left behind, because as we've seen time and time again, there's no upgrade program from physical media to digital media. Just doesn't happen, and if it does, it's very limited. So certainly, people that are buying discs for PS5 are going to at some point lose their library, depending on the speculative nature of what happens in the games industry and what delivery mechanism reigns supreme, which is probably going to be some kind of digital or streaming medium. So in theory, assuming everything goes correctly, where we see another PlayStation, it's a traditional console, but it doesn't accept discs, still lets you do digital downloads, it's still x86 based, it's still backwards compatible, then you're carrying over your PS5 library, and somebody that's been buying discs does not. But quite honestly, that in and of itself might be a little benefit, which is that it does make you keep your games. So like, as an example, my best friend Terrell, who you've seen in the one video we did together, I love him. I've known him for like 18-something years. We both like collecting physical games, but he'll sell them, I won't. And the problem there is that he'll sell something, but then he'll buy it again 3, 4, 5 times over. And so I often tell him, like, dude, don't sell that game, you're going to want it again. Don't sell that console, you're going to want it again. And he just does this over and over and over again. He spent so much money on things that I know he's going to want to play again. And I don't know, that's like a weird habit of his. I don't really understand it, but it's just what he does. So maybe a digital PS5 would keep his library, although we're both pretty stubborn. We will buy physical until we no longer can. But anyway, I think that's most of the points that we needed to cover. Actually, I don't think I mentioned this one, but depending on the country you live in, your internet speed might be pretty poor, so that also isn't a very favorable situation for you. There's just so much working against this thing. I mean, if you remember on my YouTube community tab, the poll that I held, over 90,000 votes, obviously most people going for that disc-based PS5, although 20% for the digital edition is pretty impressive. That will certainly make this thing probably the most successful digital-only console that we've ever seen, although it definitely is a low-volume machine, despite what some people are thinking and saying. It's not going to be a 60-40 split. It's not going to be 50-50. It's going to be low volume, which is fine for Sony. I mean, they'll take it, of course. For something like Sony and even Microsoft, you know, they're established brands, so they can do things like this where they offer options, and that's what I've been saying. This generation and the upcoming one is all about options. You can, you know, buy digital, stream, reward services, all these subscription services, Xbox Play Anywhere, you know, Remote Play. I mean, there's just so many delivery mechanisms, and that's why Sony and Microsoft can leverage these things. That's why something like Stadia is having a tough go of it, because not only is it just streaming, but it's just streaming. You can't do anything else, so it's just a tough sell for so many people. And so to get rid of one of the most flexible delivery mechanisms for games, I think it's going to be a really tough sell for most consumers. Either way, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you haven't yet, of course, please subscribe for the best PlayStation news, reviews, and updates that are here on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Mystic Ryan, and that is it. I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.